Right, we are now live on YouTube. So if you don't want to have yourself seen on the YouTube channel and on the recording, because this is being recorded, it will be kept on YouTube for posterity, then do feel free to turn off your video. As I said, I'll do the muting once. Sorry, that was just some feedback, as you probably appreciated. It wasn't me just literally repeating everything twice. No. Hugh, if we just have a couple more minutes before we start.
I'm fine. Okay. I'll just, you press the button and I'll go.
Okay. Thank you.
He entered Parliament when he was 31 and spent the rest of his life in public service. It's going to be a long process.
Okay, should we make a start? I'll mute everybody now. People may continue to be admitted to the talk as the evening goes on, but I'll mute everybody now. Unmute Hugh, obviously. So just muted everybody. Hugh, yeah. So Hugh, you're back with us. So a really warm welcome to everybody. I know there've been various people who've given their apologies, if you like, because they're away on holiday or doing other things. But hopefully that's the beauty of us going onto YouTube as well, so that Hugh's talk will be recorded and people could go and you can either revisit it or people can see it for the first time on our YouTube channel. We're really lucky to have Hugh Warwick with us tonight. He, I think, sort of describes himself, or maybe it's me just describing him, as a hedgehog-loving ecologist, an author and spokesperson for the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. I'm sure he will give lots of other descriptions of himself as well. But Hugh's written lots of books on hedgehogs. He's also written a book called Linescapes, which might form the basis of the future talk. And most recently he's just published a book on the beaver, which again in Derbyshire may be a really live topic for us with the recent release of beavers at Willington Wetlands by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. When I was talking to Hugh yesterday, he mentioned that he'd gone to Leicester Polytechnic, I think it was, Hugh, and from there was offered the chance to escape by going to North Ronaldsay to study hedgehogs. And that seemed to have been the catalyst for a career in hedgehogging, and in other things to do with ecology and the natural world. So I think that, so I'm certain, I don't just think it, I'm certain that Hugh's talk will be fascinating, and he will give us much more detail about himself and his experience, but also give us lots to savour, if that's the right word, about hedgehogs. So Hugh, if you'd like to share your screen and take it away.
Yes.
Sorry, just to let people know, it will go over about an hour. There'll be questions and answers at the end. If you're watching on the live stream, we will monitor the chat on there. So if people want to ask questions, we can take questions from there. And similarly, if people here want to put their questions into chat, you can do, or you can wait until the end if you're on the live Zoom, and there'll be a chance for questions then. Sorry, Hugh.
That's all right. Thank you. Let me do the magical jiggery pokery thing and pull up a talk, which will be hopefully, no, it's this one. Where should we go? And make that play. Thank you very much. Go away, get gone, so I can get access to this. Oh, you pain in the backside. Go. Yes, it's working. So Rachel, if you could gesticulate in some manner which suggests that you can see a proper screen of good. Yeah. That's a good gesticulation. Thank you.
I can.
Good. So so actually the talk is going to be not so much about me, but more about hedgehogs, and in particular trying to address the thorny issue, the staple of many a bad joke of why did the hedgehog cross the road, of which there are many answers, to see its flatmate, to show it had guts, all those sorts of things, which are deeply unfortunate. But the real answer to the question about why the hedgehog crossed the road is because our planning system is so inept that it fails to build in provision for wildlife. And one of the things which you will see throughout the process of this talk is the real need to address the issue of fragmentation, landscape habitat fragmentation. And it's the reason why I spend so much time talking about hedgehogs, because they're the perfect tool to talk about these quite big ecological issues, because on the whole, everybody loves hedgehogs, as we shall see. And as Rachel said, I sort of began my life as a student up on Orkney doing bits of work up there, and it was a great opportunity to do this. This photograph actually came from a few years later. I was radio tracking hedgehogs in Devon, and the reason that this photograph is being thrust upon you is because I'm absolutely, I was delighted when it got sent to me only quite recently by Pat Morris, because my wife had taken a photograph of me about 2 years ago. And come on, basically nothing's changed. In 30 years, I'm still doing pretty much exactly the same thing. I'm still wearing the same coloured top. I'm still bothering hedgehogs. And whilst most people who sort of started out doing ecological studies, sort of start with mice, move on to hedgehogs, but on their way to badgers, and eventually end up studying elephants and lions. I started with hedgehogs and realized that they really are the most important and wonderful creature on the planet. So there's no point going any further. So I've done a lot of work doing the sort of radio tracking and the counting back then when I was younger and fitter. Now I spend more time managing other people who are fitter and younger than me. Over the years, I've got involved with all sorts of things. You may cast your mind back to 2003, when the RSPB, bless their cotton socks, started killing the hedgehogs in the Outer Hebrides on the islands of South Uist, Benbecula and North Uist. And I got involved. I actually went up to do a piece of Radio 4, but ended up getting involved with the campaign because the justification for killing was utterly inept, and it turned out that they had employed the chief executive of the Humane Slaughter Association to assess what the best solution to the problem was, and rather surprisingly, he suggested humane slaughter. Only a little later on, I actually got into trouble with some of my colleagues because I wrote a rather a pithy comment about the RSPB embracing the hedgehog. I don't know if you've noticed that the RSPB's given up on birds. They recognize that hedgehogs are far cuter, and so they market themselves almost entirely using hedgehogs, or at least they used to. Apparently, I shouldn't have rocked the boat like that. Diplomacy was never one of my strong points, in fact. So I've done lots of bits and pieces. I ended up, because of all this, ended up writing books because it's actually quite a good story. I wasn't planning on writing books. I live in Oxford, and I am rather surrounded by authors. But it was more a case of just thinking, well, I should give it a go, and ended up writing a book called The Prickly Affair, which remains the only book ever to be published with endorsements on the cover from both Jeanette Winterson, one of the nation's greatest writers, and Anne Widdecombe. I think this is possibly the only thing these two women have ever agreed upon ever in their entire lives. My second book on hedgehogs, about the iconography of hedgehogs, was endorsed by a Robin, and I wrote another book which came out last October. The Hedgehog book. It's part of a series by Graph-Egg, and it's full of glossy photographs and is all rather lovely. I should say this is a really subtle advert, because if I was coming and talking to you in person, which is obviously what I'd hoped to do, because Buxton is a glorious and magnificent place, and I have good friends who live in Buxton, I have noticed that they haven't turned up to the talk, though, so there'll be words spoken about that. And so what I would be doing is doing the talk and being all with you in presence, and there'd be a stack of books in front of me, and at the end of the event you would come and queue up and hold my books and clutch them to your heart and ask me to sign them, and obviously I can't do that because I'm not there with you. So I do put in a call that if any of you feel the urge to purchase any of my books, please don't hesitate. Make me very happy. But also, whilst I can't sign your books, I have some quite sweet little hedgehog book plates. And so if you drop me a line, the @Hedgehog Hugh thing will get to me. Drop me a line, and then I'll send you my address, and you send me a stamped addressed envelope, and I can send you book plates as well. So there we go. Advert nearly over, because as Rachel did say, it was on Thursday, publication day for the Beaver book. I had so much fun with beavers. But the thing about doing a book on beavers is that I finished writing it in May. We were editing it and sorting out pictures in June. But it's been non-stop beaverage ever since then. I mean, there's been beaver stories the entire time. I could have even stuck Boris bloody Johnson in the book if I'd waited long enough. But Derbyshire, that was a real sort of case in point. So come on now, couldn't you have done this either earlier or at least wait till my book is out? But no, Derbyshire is just pressing ahead and doing its own thing. But I've seen wonderful videos of those beavers being launched into the wild, and it's just I mustn't get distracted by beavers, but I'm really quite excited by beavers, and all the more wonderful reasons to come up to Buxton. All of this has ended up, not the beaver stuff, but the previous stuff, ended up with me being recruited by the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, and I'm officially their spokesperson. I'm not sort of employed by them as such, but I'll get my expenses and costs covered if I'm charging around the country to go and persuade the world's media that they want to learn more about hedgehogs. And it's with this sort of thing, you end up, it's normally very quiet, but then every now and then suddenly everything erupts because hedgehogs have become the subject which must be discussed. We have discovered that hedgehogs are very, very popular. Oops, and in fact, that's the reason why I keep going on about hedgehogs. I'm often asked, why do you just keep going on about hedgehogs? And the simple answer is revealed in this, this is back in 2013. But every time there's a vote or a poll about the nature icon for the country or the nation's favorite wild animal or whatever it is, the hedgehog always wins. And this may seem entirely trivial as a justification, but actually is really important, because as I alluded to at the beginning, I'm really interested in habitat fragmentation. I'm really interested in the connectivity of our landscape. I'm really interested in the way that we grow our food and what food is grown. I'm really interested in the way that our infrastructure chops up or carves up our landscape, hence writing a book about landscapes. All of these things. Now, all of these subjects can and do confront some people. People will get agitated. They will begin to get a little bit defensive about it. But you can begin these conversations using hedgehogs. You can start a conversation talking about hedgehogs, and very few people will shut down because very few people have got a problem with hedgehogs. And it means you can begin to start to discuss really quite important, complex ecological issues using, I suppose you could describe it as a Trojan hedgehog or something like that. But yeah, you can get yourself in through the front door. This is a slightly frustrating slide. The State of Britain's Hedgehogs 2021 is being written at this moment. For the reason that I don't think they can trust me, I haven't been given the data. However, a new report is coming and it will be out probably mid-November, looking at the state of Britain's hedgehogs. Again, journalists will often ask me a very specific question. How many hedgehogs are there? We don't know. We've got a number of guesses out there. There is a figure which is often talked about 32 million hedgehogs in the 1950s. That is a figure based on a glorious bit of extrapolation after a walk around Kew Gardens on a warm summer's evening. So it's not an enormously robust piece of work, that. But what we've done is, and this is we as in the People's Trust and the Hedgehog Society, is that we have gathered together citizen science projects and other projects, and we are looking at change rather than absolute numbers, because we can be fairly certain about change when you've done the same surveys for decades in the same manner. You begin to see that change over time. So in 2018, what we could say robustly was that urban hedgehog population was down by 30% since the year 2000, and rural hedgehog populations were down by 50% since the year 2000. That's actually pretty shockingly bad. There's some good news in that the 2015 survey, we had roughly the same urban population decline. So we'd leveled off with the urban population decline, but rural hedgehog population still in free fall. I am really, really, really excited for and slightly nervous of the data that we're going to receive for the 2021 report. Going back in time a little bit further, there was work done by the Mammal Society, which estimated about a 2/3 decline since the, I think 1993, I think it was. And then going back in time further, well, we don't know, but I have done over the years hundreds of talks to Women's Institute groups, to Probus groups, to townswomen guilds, to University of Third Age, to gardening clubs, to all of these groups. And actually, when I started doing it, I looked at all of the people in my audiences as being really quite old. Now I'm beginning to see them more as my kin. Oh well, but that is just the gradual process of entropy creeping up on me. But it was, especially early on, the perspective I was able to get from talking to people in their 80s, 15 years ago, was really illuminating. And given the data that we've got, which is robust, I then have a guess that UK population of hedgehogs is down between 90 and 95% since the end of the Second World War. That is not robust. It's not something I could write up in Nature and get properly credited for. It's a guess, but it's a guess based on lots of anecdotes, talking to lots of people who used to see hedgehogs on a regular basis and really don't now. What would interest me in discussion at the end of this is if people there who maybe of a slightly more mature disposition to myself could share their experiences, whether they're seeing dramatic changes over time. Anyway, hopefully in the news, there will be lots of stories about hedgehogs and the State of Britain's Hedgehogs Report 2021 before the year is out. Now, there's a reason I really want to do proper science on this, is because every now and then stories appear which just aren't true. In fact, only the other day, I got contacted by somebody who had just been interviewed by local BBC Nottingham, I think it was. And she said, oh, I told them that hedgehogs could be extinct within 10 years. And I was saying, oh, no, well, that's not true. We don't need to over-egg the pudding. This article from Michaela Strachan, it was in the Radio Times, she wrote a piece saying that she thought hedgehogs would be extinct in 10 years. That was back in 2015. And clearly hedgehogs are not going to be extinct by 2025. There was never a risk that they would be extinct by 2025. There's a risk that their population will be smaller, there'll be fewer hedgehogs out there, but we really don't need hyperbole. The problem is bad enough as it is. My assumption was that she had been misquoted. Now, journalists are unfortunately prone to doing that sort of thing. A while ago, there was a horrible incident with a friend of mine had got a pest controller to get rid of the squirrels that were in their attic. They got a newborn baby, they're worried about wires being chewed. And so the pest controller turned up and he'd got these tunnel traps. And he put one up in the attic, and as he was coming down, he said, "Oh, I can see they're running along the base of that fence." So he put one down there. And my friend, you know, early fatherhood, he was bemused, and he said, assuming that the pest controller knew what he was doing. Next morning, he came down, and there was a hedgehog killed in this trap. And so he called me up and just, what can we do? What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen, etc. I spent time tracking down the pest controllers, and we managed to remove the body before the kids came home from school, the older kids. And it was, the Times got in touch with me because I'd written a blog post about it, and they were really interested in the story. And in the end, they said, "Well, look, how many hedgehogs are killed like this each year?" And I said, "I've absolutely no idea because nobody has ever done any research in this." And they said, "Oh, come on, you must have an idea." I said, "Look, this could be the only hedgehog killed like this ever. There could be tens, there could be hundreds, there could be thousands, but we simply don't know because nobody's done the research." And so the headline in the Times was, British Hedgehog Preservation Society says thousands of hedgehogs are killed in traps each year. So I know how this thing works. So when I was, obviously as a spokesperson for the Hedgehog Society, my phone started ringing when this happened. And I was accusing journalists of misquoting her. I presume she was referring to localized extinctions. And by the end of the day, I was beginning to get a little bit short with people, it seems. I hadn't noticed, but The Independent, bless them, at the time they still existed, they published a quote which proves that they do listen and do quote absolutely precisely. It does also mean that one of the first lessons of media training, which I do train people in how to present themselves to journalists, most of the first lesson is think before you speak. Anyway, this is the hedgehog that the Independent always used to use. And it was it's really interesting. It's a hedgehog which has got three things which stand out. One is it's out in daylight, so it's probably poorly. The fact that it's covered in ticks means it's probably quite poorly. And the fact that it looks really poorly means that it's probably poorly. I just think it's quite an illuminating hedgehog to use in these things. If you see a hedgehog out now in the daytime, it is ill. And so the best course of action is to pop it into a box with an old towel you're happy to wash to high temperature, give it some sort of meaty pet food in a jam jar lid and some water in a saucer, and get in touch with your local hedgehog rescue. Because hedgehogs out in the daytime now are probably too light, too thin to survive hibernation, and if they're out in daytime, they're probably suffering from some other problem as well. So you can step in and do your rescue. And we need to do the rescue because, well, there are an awful lot of problems again, our hedgehogs. It is looking at the rural situation first. It's impossible to grow a profitable crop of oilseed rape on a vast scale without using a vast amount of biocide. This was actually a term that Rachel Carson developed. What she used, I mean, she was writing about pesticides and herbicides and all sorts, and she just said they're biocides. They're things that kill. Let's call them what they are. They kill life. And it was Dave Goulson, a wonderful author and academic, he's written books on bumblebees and other things. He did a calculation based on I think it was Freedom of Information request data from DEFRA about the numbers of applications of different biocides per crop. And on average, it's about 17 different biocides per crop. Now, the farmer needs to remove competition to be able to make a profit. That's an entirely reasonable position to take. Unfortunately, what the farmer sees as competition, the hedgehog, the bat, the bird, the toad, they all see as food. So we create an ecological desert. We degrade this landscape enormously, which has the impact of then denying hedgehogs access to this land, and also meaning that this land becomes very difficult for the hedgehogs to cross. Not only because they're not going to be attracted to walk into it because there's no food, but also because the fields themselves have grown and grown and grown. And hedgehogs, the name is a bit of a giveaway, really. I mean, they hog the hedges. They are a woodland edge specialist. They are an edge specialist. And so they will tend to find the edge of a field if they can. So not only does this remove land from the ability of the hedgehog to use it, but also it fragments the wider landscape too. Oops. Can't have a conversation about hedgehogs without mentioning badgers. And it was in the last talk I gave, having just been organizing the launch of my beaver book, I ended up talking about beavers. If I say the word beaver inappropriately now, I'd like to apologize. And for the next bit, certainly it's supposed to be badger. Badgers and hedgehogs, there's a real conflict here. A while ago, I was at the Badger Trust AGM, and I was doing a talk, and the Dominic Dyer, the then chief executive of the Badger Trust, as he was sort of guiding me up onto the stage, he said in a stage whisper that he had left the emergency exit ajar so that I could get out all the quicker, because he knew what I was about to say to this audience of badger-loving people. I have discovered through meticulous research in this matter that there are two sorts of people when it comes to badgers. There are those that know with absolute certainty that in the pantheon of all that is good, the badger sits up there with Lady Di and Mother Teresa. Absolute knowledge that they can do no wrong. And with equal certainty, there's a group of people who know that the four horsemen of the apocalypse had a pet badger, and that badgers are responsible for Brexit, COVID, Boris Johnson, and Donald Trump. So and this is the thing, and this is where we struggle. And I'm going to apologize in advance for what I'm about to say. It's not a black and white issue, okay? It's ecology. If you want something simple, something which is going to be easily polarized like that, I study astrophysics or something easy. If you want complications, study ecology. Badgers and hedgehogs have a deeply complicated relationship. But every time we talk about the fact that badgers will kill hedgehogs, this is what happens. This is what the press throws up at you. Admittedly, I think these are mostly quotes from Robin Page, just because he's a bit of a target of mine at the moment. He ended up being sacked from the Telegraph. I think he was sacked because they thought he was too racist even for the Telegraph, but I can't remember quite exactly what was going on there. But people like Robin Page, true country people who really know what's going on out there, who really know the truth of it in a way that soft-handed urban dwellers like myself cannot possibly understand, know that we need to kill badgers to save hedgehogs. And this is an ecologically illiterate position to take. There is a real problem between the two species, but for over 10,000 years, they've been living quite happily next to each other. You know, they can coexist. Something else has changed. And it's not, I mean, you could talk about the extra protection the badgers get, that's fine. But then if you look at the numbers of badgers being killed on the roads each year, I mean, it would be some very, very busy betas if they could match up to the numbers of badgers being killed on the roads. There is a much more complicated situation at play. And in fact, badgers have what's known as an asymmetric intra-guild predatory relationship. They are principally competitors for the same food. They operate within the same ecological guild. Their main diet consists of macroinvertebrates, of worms and other things like that. Badgers have got a number of advantages. Badgers are better at hunting macroinvertebrates than hedgehogs. Badgers can dig, hedgehogs can just scratch the surface. So badgers outcompete hedgehogs to some extent. We add to this that badgers actually fragment the landscape. If you've got an active badger set or badger latrine down a hedgerow or down a wall line, dispersing hedgehogs from what the researchers refer to as rural refugia, but actually I would normally call a village, they will get to the badger set or the badger latrine, stop and come back again. So presence of badgers, they're out competing hedgehogs, they are fragmenting the landscape, and our best understanding is at the moment that when their wider ecosystem is degraded, then you end up with their relationship shifting from one of competition to one of predation. It's not simply a matter of we must kill badgers to save hedgehogs. There are wider ecological issues at play, and it's yeah. If you've got a really complicated problem and you are presented with a very easy solution, it's probably either wrong or they're a fascist. That's kind of how it works. Really sensitively complicated issues require nuance and require subtlety. So yes, let's not go beating up badgers any more than well, actually maybe do a bit less beating up badgers. Oh, this is just because I'm thinking you might be a slightly more erudite audience to my WI selection. I just stuck this in because it was work that we funded, and it was just in case there were any doubters about the complexity of this. This was a particularly good paper looking at the intra-guild predator relationship, and Ben Williams was one of our students. So the most stereotypical demise of the hedgehog obviously comes at the hands of the wheels of motor vehicles, and we've run. It's rather unfortunate that one of our best surveys is called Mammals on Roads. People's Trust run it, and this is basically hedgehogs haven't got any cleverer when it comes to crossing roads, and so the same journeys are driven year on year on year. You can also download an app to do this as well, and it gives you the opportunity to chart the mammals you see. And this is a really good tool because we know that if there are no hedgehogs on a certain set of roads, it really is likely that there are no hedgehogs in the wider environment. You very rarely, for example, see hedgehogs on motorways, but that's because the motorways are so noisy and so off-putting that radio tracked hedgehogs will just veer away from motorways. But busy rural A roads are particularly lethal. The A44, I think it's out of Oxford, going through out towards out to the west, out towards Evesham. That's an absolute death trap for hedgehogs. So those roads are ones which are particularly difficult for hedgehogs to navigate. So we reckon around 100,000 are killed on the roads each year, which, if the population in the UK, spring population of hedgehogs, is around 500,000, which we've got some guesses that it is, that fits in quite neatly with other estimates for road casualties around Europe, at around 20% of the spring population. But there is another part that roads have to play. This is the ring road around Oxford. There was a horrible crash around here about 15 years ago. And so Highways England came in and they put in these concrete barriers. This road separates a nature reserve and suburban East Oxford. And it went from being, I mean, at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's not that much traffic. A hedgehog would be able to make it across, probably. Now it's impossible to cross. It's gone from being a bit of a barrier to a complete barrier. And these concrete barriers have been put in all over the country because they are effective at stopping head-on collisions, but they are adding to the fragmentation of our landscape. And this fragmentation is absolutely crucial to understand. And it can come in all forms. This is 50 meters behind me. This is the boundary brook, which was concrete canalized in the end of the 1970s, early 80s, in an attempt to stop flooding in our estate, which was working fine until Thames Water sort of took over and decided not to bother updating the drains, given how many more people were living here, or actually clean them. So anyway, just occasionally we have to wade through sewage still, but it's also a complete pitfall trap. There is no way a hedgehog can get out of this once it's in. I've rescued 4 from there in the last 20 years. Don't often walk down there in daytime when you're going to be able to see them. And it's so it's an inevitable death sentence for hedgehogs falling into it. And so this is just, this fragmentation happens all over the place. There is a small footbridge up ahead there that goes into what is locally known as Pooh Path. It's a very dogged area. And so, yes, whilst a hedgehog may use it, they're unlikely to. And so they will fall into the brook. This fragmentation is really crucial. This is some radio tracking work done by my friend Nigel Reeve. It's an 18-hole golf course in Surrey, and this is one male hedgehog over 12 nights. As you can see, it played an entire round. This is a 30-hectare golf course, And so what Nigel found is that on the whole, the home range of male hedgehogs was around 30 hectares. They have home ranges that they rather grumpily share. They don't have territories that they defend. So male hedgehogs about 30 hectares, female hedgehogs about 10 hectares, that on average at night, a male hedgehog was walking 2 kilometers, a female hedgehog 1 kilometer. There are, I mean, the different surveys give slightly different responses to these questions, but it's in that sort of ballpark. We got Tom Morehouse at Wild Crew in Oxford to go over all of the data and try to find for us the minimum viable population requirements. And this is, sorry, forgive me, I'm out in the cabin and my wife's just put a kneel seat in here and I'm remembering how much I hate kneeling. Anyway, so I've got so what Tom did, he analyzing the minimum viable population. So if you can imagine an island out in the middle of the ocean, and it is the most amazingly hedgehog friendly island you could imagine. It's got all of the food, all of the shelter, all of the water, and there's one male hedgehog. Yeah, obviously then this is not a viable population. You go to the other extreme, you have a small desert island in the middle of the ocean and you've got 1,000 hedgehogs on there and it's not a viable population. And so between those two absurd points, you have your minimum viable population, which you can work out. And obviously the islands we're talking about are not as absolute as an island in the middle of the ocean, but they are islands in effect that they're surrounded by roads, by canals, by housing developments, by all sorts of obstructions which prevent hedgehogs from moving through the landscape. And so what Tom found out was that the starting population in a good habitat is about 32 individual hedgehogs. But the area they need is 90 hectares, so nearly a square kilometre. And so this is where we begin to see the problem. And this is suburban landscape. This is the best hedgehog habitat we've got. We need to find areas which are a square kilometre in size without a canal, without a busy road, without any of these big obstacles running through them. And that's right at the heart of why hedgehog populations are suffering so dramatically. And we've got here my favourite bit of research, because it goes to show how things have changed. When I was studying hedgehogs, it was radio tracking at night and it invariably rained. And it was cold and it was wet. I was living in a caravan and it was a sort of cold and lonely, muddy existence. Now, they put GPS tags on the hedgehogs. So what you're going to do is see a little dance. You'll see the red one, for example, which is sort of lower right at the moment. You see the male hedgehogs and the female hedgehogs. If you look at the key, you'll see they do move very different amounts. 8 o'clock at night, they start off. This is a housing estate in Brighton. And as you can see, clock ticking through. It's time we get to 8 o'clock, they're all off and active. And you can see how many gardens each of these hedgehogs is actually using. And this is right at the heart of the work which we've been doing for quite some time now, is trying to ensure this level of connectivity is maintained. Because if you've got hedgehogs which are traveling this sort of distance, they're doing it because they are looking for food, they're looking for water, they're looking for shelter, and they're looking for mates. And they are used to, and their ideal habitat's a fairly mosaic style of habitat. Different woodland edge habitat is that ideally that sort of thing. You've got both the light and the shade, the light and the dark of things. Anyway, this is instructive, I feel. And it's right at the heart of the work that we do with the campaign we've launched 10 years ago now, called Hedgehog Street. In fact, the 10th birthday event of the Hedgehog Street calendar, which I'm most excited by, is the cake competition, which we've been judging. And we're about to announce the winners for the best hedgehog cake. Can't get enough hedgehog cake. When I do WI talks, they ask me about, I have a rider basically, like all rock stars do, and I demand cake. I like cake. Anyway, so we've been working together for 10 years. It was one of those moments that we both got left some money from Dilys Breeze, a BBC natural history producer, who's a big fan of the hedgehog, and she left some money to the People's Trust, left some money to the Hedgehog Society to work on hedgehogs. And because we have people in common, we were talking about it, and we think, well, we could just carry on independently but actually, if we work together, we're going to get far more bang for our buck, and we've been doing it very successfully. And I think it's 8 PhDs we funded so far. So we're funding a lot of the research as well as the campaigning side of it. One of our bits of work is the Big Hedgehog Map, and so I thought I ought to have a little look at you guys. I don't know if you're familiar with the Big Hedgehog Map, but it's a fairly crude data gathering tool. And based on postcode, you can pop in your sightings of hedgehogs. And I was actually quite impressed with the numbers of people around Buxton who are obviously doing this. I mean, obviously, this is there's going to be chunks of this landscape which are unpeopled or very few people living there, and so nobody's seeing the hedgehogs that might be there. But it does also give an indication of where things are working well. And it would certainly seem that Buxton has even more reason to come and visit it. Good secondhand bookshop, lovely people, beavers and hedgehogs. I mean, what more do you want? So I'm quite excited by that. So please do, if you have sightings of hedgehogs, pop them on this, including dead hedgehogs, because dead hedgehog data is really useful, especially if we can find hot spots on roads, because we're currently lobbying. There's a ridiculous thing, Chris Grayling. I actually probably don't need to say any more than that, but Chris Grayling, he was transport person for a while. Then he was somebody, nothing to do with me, nothing to do with the people I work with, nominated him as the hedgehog champion, because apparently he likes hedgehogs. And so he said we should have a hedgehog road sign to protect hedgehogs. And it was the most nonsense idea that we've come across, because it turned out he got the sign made, but not legislation changed, so that the only way you could get this hedgehog sign put up to go, you've got your toads out there and your deer signs, is if there are any incidents, any accidents resulting in serious injury or death caused by hedgehogs. And it's just not because of trying to protect hedgehogs, but trying to protect people. And if somebody swerved and hit a brick wall because they had seen a hedgehog, then that might count for it. I had assumed naively that they weren't complete idiots. But all the other road signs, the deer signs are there to protect people, because you will crash and injure yourself if you hit a deer. And the toads are there not to protect toads, but to warn you of the skid risk of migrating toads. It's so anyway, this is disastrous, but please do give us your data. And we will carry on making holes. I do it occasionally. I find power tools utterly terrifying, actually. there are many skills I've got, but one of them is not operating power tools with any degree of machismo. However, it works. We have a stunt hedgehog that we use to check these holes. 13 centimeters across is what we need. I mean, 13 centimeters square is ideal, but you can get a core drill bit, which is 127 millimeters, and that's about fine. And so we've been arguing for this, pushing for this for the last 10 years. I think that one of the reasons the urban population decline has leveled off is because we focus most of our work at the urban hedgehog populations. We have now started working with the farming community, with the planning community, and with developers. So we're hoping to see wider change coming. There have been many innovative styles of hedgehog hole put into place. Using a very angry hedgehog and a catapult is one way of creating the holes, but it can cause upset. This is the Cherwell Boathouse in Oxford, and I just think that's absolutely fantastic. There's a village just north of Oxford called Curlington, and it's just on the foothills of the Cotswolds. Lots of stone walls in the village. I've been taught there, I think 3 times now. I've done lectures to their conservation society, and they ended up deciding to embrace hedgehogs, and because they'd seen them around. So what they did was get a map of the village, big map of the village, and then work out the minimum number of holes they needed to make to connect the maximum number of gardens. And they have done absolutely amazingly. They've connected up the vast majority of the village. In fact, I'm going up there in 2 weeks' time to see how things are progressing. And they've gone full Neolithic in some places. You know, they've worked with the churchyard to get the hedgehog holes going in through there, and the local pub, and all of these things. Also, trying to keep the hedgehogs off the road which runs through the middle of the village as much as possible. And they're making real headway. But my friend Chris, who's the energy behind all of this, his garden is 2.5 feet lower than his neighbours, and I'd asked him what he was going to do about that. And we'd sort of jokingly talked about trampolines and all sorts of things like that. But just he said, no, I'm going to build a staircase. And I thought he was joking. But then he built a staircase. And this is the moment which I absolutely adore. And this, for those of you missing out on Strictly Come Dancing, I'm really sorry not to have this particular bit of video. But on the first night that the staircase was opened, a hedgehog came through the hole at the top and it paused at the top. And then it sashayed down the staircase. I can imagine it hearing big band music in the background. I mean, he'd been baiting it either end. He'd been encouraging the hedgehogs to that area. But it was the first night that he used it. It worked. And then when it's all grown up, the vegetation had grown up, he sent me this video from his trail camera. If you look at this, you'll see two things. One, that hedgehogs can use it going both forwards and backwards. But also, if you look closely, you might notice a design flaw. So yes, I've asked him to put in a railing around the top because it's the indignity of it all, really. I mean, hedgehog spines are, I mean, they're modified hair. They're fantastic things. They're very good shock absorbers, so they will cushion the fall of a hedgehog, and they will climb considerable heights. As many people come and tell me their stories of hedgehogs. One man was telling me at an event a couple of years ago how he'd been woken up in the middle of the night by a strange noise outside his bedroom door on the first floor, and come out and found a hedgehog there. And so he was looking rather confused at the hedgehog, picked it up, went downstairs, and realized it'd been a hot night. He'd left the back door open, and so he put the hedgehog out, shut the door, went back to bed. The next morning, he went to his attic office up another flight of stairs and found the hedgehog had been up there too, because it had pooped just under his desk. So yeah, I mean, they can climb considerable heights if they really, really want to. Anyway, so Chris said I was going to go and photograph him for a magazine I was writing for earlier this year. And he said, you've got to come and see what he's done with another one of his neighbors. And I just thought this was brilliant. I should point out Chris is about 6 foot tall. You know, he's not some small little chap. And this is so brilliant because it was another one of those moments of going, well, how are we going to overcome the height difference between these two gardens? And does it work? Well, obviously we have to look at the video. And here we go. It's so you build it and they will come. They will use these holes. They will be creative and find their way around the place. And obviously fencing manufacturers have got involved. They're now very keen that you can go and buy things to facilitate this sort of access to your garden. And I set up a campaign. So change.org, it was 3 years ago now, change.org got in touch with me. And they were, Rachel, do you want me to stop at an hour? Because or can we go on a little bit longer? Is it okay?
Yes, it's fine to go on.
Because I just noticed the time. It's nearly 10 to 8, and I didn't want to. Well, we did start a bit late, didn't we? So
yeah, we did. We started about 5 minutes or so late. So yeah,
it's all right because I've still got quite a bit I want to say. So change.org, the online petition company, got in touch with me 3 years ago, and they said we want you to do a campaign about hedgehogs. And what would you call for to return hedgehogs back to their former glory? And I was all up for that. I said, look, I've been waiting 30 years for this opportunity. You bet I'm in for this. And they said, well, what's your question? What are you going to ask for? And so I said, it's very simple. What we need to call for is the dismantling of industrial capitalism and the replacing of it with something nicer. And they said no. And so we had a negotiation back and forth. And in the end, it was almost an embarrassingly small ask that I was allowed to get away with. And what my ask is that the planning system is changed so that all new housing developments have to come with hedgehog highways. It feels like such a trivial ask, but it was unthreatening. It was one that might get some attention. And they were selling it to me by the fact that every update I do for the petition site goes out to everybody who signed it. And so suddenly we had 100,000 signatures on the petition. And it meant every time I was essentially writing a hedgehog-based blog, it was going to 100,000 people. When we got to 500,000 people, I ended up having a meeting with the then housing minister, who was remarkably inept. I've forgotten who he was now. But anyway, so that was a shame, but it was a start. I met the boss of one of the biggest housing developers in the country. Then July 2019, if you can cast your mind back that far, there was a time when you probably thought things weren't going to get any worse. But as the priapic marshmallow moved into number 10 and everything was turned head over heels, there was a shift. Lots of different ministers were being moved. And it was very sad to discover that James Brokenshire had died last week, because he was Secretary of State for Housing at the time. And he was the person on his last day in office there, pushed through a change to the National Planning Policy Framework, which is a very, very, very dull document, which goes out to all the local authorities, guiding them as to what they can demand off developments. And in that, he called for the guidance that all new housing developments should come with hedgehog highways. And for me, it was so close to a victory, but unfortunately, it's a guidance note rather than anything set in stone. And there's absolutely no teeth attached to it. So I've been now keeping the petition going. Then there was a chunk of time when everybody was doing Brexit, and so there were no ministers to talk to. And now they've been doing COVID, obviously. So trivial things like nature haven't really had the attention that they're due. We've now got Michael Gove in office in housing, and he's my next target. So wish me luck, because I want to try and get this changed so that we end up with something with some teeth, because it is a way of helping hedgehogs. So change.org/saveourhedgehogs. Rachel, if you were to pop that into the chat so everybody could then just click on it and sign it, that'd be amazing. And then you'll get, every couple of weeks, you'll get some strange hedgehog musings from me. It's now got to over 1 million people have signed it, which is rather exciting. And there was a moment earlier this year, I produced this big feature in BBC Wildlife magazine, and for a brief moment, my daughter was impressed with me, and it was a lovely moment, because Tom Holland had tweeted that I was the Lorax of hedgehogs. Now, those of you familiar with the story of the Lorax will know what a wonderful story it is, so that's high praise. Tom Holland is the actor who plays Spider-Man and is an extremely cute young man. That's the Tom Holland my daughter likes. Unfortunately, the Tom Holland who tweeted about me is a historian who works for Radio 4. And it was at that moment that she went back to being disappointed in me. So we have this petition going now at over 1 million strong. And I have a Hedgehog Highways Facebook group, which is now nearly, I think, 19,000 members, and 2 very good moderators as well. And this is just a way of getting questions answered quickly about hedgehogs. If you've got a particularly awkward wall you're trying to get a hole through, or height differentials or whatever, people here will offer you suggestions as to how to solve that problem. I'm just going to quickly skip through the personal things you can do to help hedgehogs. Hedgehogs can swim, but not forever. And they do need water. So obviously, as a society like yours, you will undoubtedly be into wildlife ponds, not ornamental ponds. But if you've got an ornamental pond or anything like that, then it needs a ramp or some sort of beach end so that the hedgehogs can get out. Don't drop litter. This is an anesthetized hedgehog, which had been found with a post-service elastic band around its neck and under its armpit. It was rehabilitated and released into the wild. And it's over 1 million elastic bands estimated to be dropped every single day by the Postal Service around the country. I said that at a talk a while ago, and somebody wrote to me saying, I thought that was completely ridiculous exaggeration. So I went and checked, but actually it's nearly 2 million elastic bands dropped every single day. They don't need to drop them, and you can collect them up and pop them through the letterbox into the letterboxes, and they will take them back. But you can buy stickers, or get sent stickers and leaflets from the Hedgehog Society just to remind them not to drop them. Hedgehogs are brilliant, cute, wonderful, gorgeous things, and part of the reason they're so attractive is that they have no fight or flight response, which means for me as a researcher, that when you're going out following them, it means that when you get close to them, on the whole, they'll stop and roll up into a ball, allow you to get close to them. You can pick them up to weigh them if you're doing a survey, and they're not going to bite you, and it's kind of safe and relatively easy. But this also means that when confronted by the noise of a mower or a strimmer, their reaction is going to be to roll up into a ball. Well, first of all, they frown. The frown muscle on the hedgehog brings the spines forward over their eyes and nose, brings all the spines up, and then they'll roll into a ball. They can stay rolled up like that for hours. I mean, it's a very energy efficient form of self-defense. But unfortunately, the crackling noise of a bonfire or the noise of an oncoming strimmer, so it's just going to cause the hedgehog to stay still. So please, 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 if you're tidying up around, especially underneath hedgerows and edges and margins of gardens, please really careful. Just check first before you go strimming. And if you're building a bonfire, as we're coming to that time of year, please build the bonfire on the day you're going to light it, because otherwise you are essentially creating the most amazing hibernaculum for hedgehogs and for amphibians, reptiles, and all sorts of other creatures too. So yeah, please do take care. And then if you're lucky, you will end up with some of this in your garden, a little bit of hedgehog poo. One of the most effective ways of finding out whether you've got hedgehogs in your garden is if there are little droppings left around the place. I did wonder whether actually one of the reasons that people were seeing fewer hedgehogs was the decline in smoking. Because so often it would have been that, you know, going out for a cigarette at night in the garden and actually bumping into a hedgehog. But no, the scientists have actually done it properly, and we know the decline is real. And then if you're really lucky, you'll get a bit of this. The hedgehog carousel, not at this time of year, hopefully. The mating ritual of the hedgehog. This is the female hedgehog in the middle. And you can see that she's frowning. The spines are brought forward over her face. The male circles around and around. Whilst the female frowns, mating cannot take place. There are lessons there for us all. And this can go on for absolutely ages. It can last for over an hour. And in the end, I mean, it can leave. And I've witnessed this, these remarkable flattened arena of vegetation, you know, surrounded by, you know, long, tall grass. And it's led to what has to be the greatest headline the Guardian has ever carried. Hedgehogs cleared of corn circle dementia. Now, you may cast your mind back to the world of the cereologists. If you're not familiar with the cereologists, their keynote speaker in the 1991 conference, I still had this piece of paper. I mean, it's so exciting. Was none other than the son of God himself, David Icke. And they were having a conference about the mysterious magical crop circles which were appearing in Wiltshire and places accessible to pubs which have got people in them with long planks of wood and bits of rope and theodolites and things. And the big question really is it Earth energies rising or is it aliens coming down? That's really the question they were addressing. But somebody put onto the program the question of whether possibly it was circling hedgehogs that were creating some of these crop circles. And what I love is that somebody then applied a bit of logic and science to this and worked out that it would require around 40,000 hedgehogs working in synchrony to create even the more modest crop circles. And therefore it was much more likely to be little green men. I mean, hedgehogs generate so much fun for me as well. There's so many absurd things that go on in the hedgehog world. I've frequently, and for those who know me would find this strange, I frequently found myself to be the most normal person in a room when I've been to many of these events. I am available for stand-up comedy, other events too. But hey, what have hedgehogs ever done for us? This is a question which I'm asked by non-specialists more than anybody else. So yeah, in person with you, I don't think I would be asked this, but it's very much that anthropocentric view of conservation. You know, what would happen to us if we didn't have? Well, so the hedgehog isn't up there with the solitary bees doing all that pollinating. They're certainly not the ecosystem engineers that beavers are. So why should we worry? Well, I argued that the hedgehog is the most important creature on the planet. This is the best cover, obviously, the magazine has ever had ever. Save the hedgehog, save the world. And the thing is, if you look to the margin, Obama and me, Desmond Tutu speaks. I managed to marginalize two of the most important creatures on the planet with my argument for the importance of the hedgehog. And this is not just nonsense and hyperbole. This is based on a little bit of what I think is reasonableness. You see, the American writer, Stephen Jay Gould, he coined a phrase. He said, "We will not fight to save what we do not love." And he was talking about conservation. And it's a very straightforward idea that liking isn't enough. I mean, I'm deeply suspicious of social media encouraging us to like things. It's all very half-hearted. It's love which creates the change. It creates the space in which we will really fight for something. And so he was very aware of that. And I understand that most wildlife and conservation groups understand it too, to some extent, but they fall into the habit of relying on the charismatic megafauna. You know, the elephants and the tigers, the whales and the dolphins. David Attenborough and his amazing, beautiful shot things. But all of these images are at a remove. They're remote. They are endangered and unobtainable. It's So I'm going to give you a horrible thought, but I'll take you back to my bedroom when I was a 14, 15-year-old. I had 3 posters on my walls. I had a beautiful big tiger above my bed, and opposite me I had a breaching humpback whale. And above my desk I had a picture of a young woman who'd gone to play tennis but forgotten her underwear. And I was a big fan of the Athena poster shop, as you can imagine. And it dawns on me that this was that's sort of the naivety of youth. I'm as likely to end up getting nose to nose with the humpback whale as I am with the tennis girl. These things aren't going to happen. They're all at a remove. If I'm lucky, I'll end up falling in love with the girl or the boy next door to me. And this is where the hedgehog comes in, because it's the animal equivalent. It's the one you actually have a chance to form a relationship with. And it's not magic. It's because, as I said, they don't have a fight or flight response. When you've rescued one from that canalized ditch, this is another one of the ones I've rescued from that ditch, you can put it down on the grass and you can make it pose for a photograph. And it will, if you're quiet, eventually unroll. And then eventually, if you're lucky, you'll get a moment which is exquisite. Just a little bit of eye contact when you get to see yourself being seen by another amazingly enormous, vigorous carnivore out there, this predator, which is the terror of invertebrates the worldwide. This is a truly wonderful creature, but we can get close to it. And if you begin to start to look at everything else out there, there are very few creatures which have as much individuality, as much character as this. Wild creatures, I should say, obviously, which you can get this close to without fear of having your nose bitten off. And that closeness, that proximity, gives you the opportunity of opening yourself up to falling in love. And that's where the fun begins. That's when we start to fight. Anyway, I'll stop wittering now, but thank you very much for listening. I shall stop sharing the screen and come back to you. And if there are any questions, I'd be very, very happy to try and answer them to the best that I can. Over to you.
Okay, if you want to unmute yourselves, if you're going to ask a question, if you want to put your cameras back on so that Hugh can see you, or if you don't, because we are still live streaming, it's your choice. The questions for Hugh about hedgehogs.
Anything else, really? I mean, I'm fairly opinionated.
Remember to unmute if you're going to ask.
It's not a question, but it is a comment. I've just noticed in the last image there, a few on the grass looking at hedgehogs, probably talking to it, and the row of houses behind, some with various sorts of fences and some hedge as well. But to the best of my knowledge, all the new housing estates around Buxton, they are charmingly surrounded by close bordered solid wooden fencing that makes it look like the residents who've just got prison exercise yards. And obviously there is no possibility that hedgehogs or anything much else can get through those fences.
Well, can I just ask you? I mean, this is what one of my greatest successes has come from using the petition and using the Facebook group for people to then go, oh, wait a minute, we see this problem, and then guiding people through the conversations with developers as these properties are going up. And for the developer, it's a no-brainer, really. If they're confronted gently, politely, persistently by people saying, well, how about you put the holes in? It costs them next to nothing. I talked to one developer and they said, oh, it's 50p a house tops to get that hole put in. The problem is getting the contractors talking to the subcontractors, talking to the subcontractors, etc., making sure that things actually happen. But for the developer, especially if there's been any sort of concern about a development, I mean, I don't want to give developments which shouldn't be built in certain areas sort of greenwash capabilities, but if they are being built, then at least have them built with sort of wildlife in mind. It's worth talking to the developers and just going into the show homes and saying, you know, this is I've been hearing about this. Here's some information about it. The petition's got over 1 million people on it, and I'll get people to write to you if you're not careful.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Is there a way in which you can put hedgehogs forward as the gardener's friend? I take it they eat quite a lot of slugs and snails.
I mean, we've used that tagline for as long as I've been studying hedgehogs. I mean, it's in fact the reason why hedgehogs got taken to Orkney and to the Hebrides, much to the upset of the ornithologists, we think was, and I've only got this anecdotally, but that the precursor of Nat Scott, which was Scottish Natural Heritage, which was whatever, one of their spokespeople said something in the 1970s about the great quality of the hedgehog as the gardener's friend, and if you don't have hedgehogs in your garden, why don't you get some? Because they'll help control slugs and snails. So it's possible that they induced that entire set of problems. I mean, I get sent photographs by people who are indignant, and it'll be a photograph of a hedgehog at a bowl of food, and feeding at the same bowl of food is some enormous banana-sized slug, and it's like, I thought you said hedgehogs eat slugs, and hedgehogs don't eat slugs the size of them. I mean, it's just, they eat really small little grey field slugs. They eat things which you don't really see. You know, the big ones you are going to notice aren't really there for the hedgehogs. And also 50% of slugs are detritivores anyway, so there is something to be in mind. The slug's job is to make soil out of dead leaf matter. So they have an important role to play. It's only 50% of slugs which are evil. And those, yes, let the hedgehogs loose on those as much as we can. There is a small but very vocal band of people on the internet who keep shouting at me, telling me that hedgehogs don't eat slugs. It's in the same way that people shout at me and say, well, you shouldn't get vaccinated or whatever. It's one of those absolute nonsense arguments. So if you see anybody saying that, then the hedgehogs do eat slugs. They don't eat slugs out of, you know, if they get confronted with a plate of Tesco's kitten kibble or a slug, they'll probably go for the kitten kibble. But I mean, if you had a choice between a nice, juicy bowl of one of my particularly good lentil dals with coconut and tomato, it's really nice, or a large sort of 5 foot long piece of badly cooked liver covered in hair gel, you know, I mean, which one are you going to go for? So hedgehog's choice is very straightforward.
Thank you.
Talking about Prime Minister again.
Sorry.
Right. Further questions, politics aside, please.
I'm happy to do politics too.
Yeah. No, we don't do politics. We don't do politics in the field club. Thank you. Further questions. Remember to unmute yourself if you're asking a question. And Penny.
Yes. On the slug topic, if you use organic slug pellets, do they have an impact on the hedgehogs?
Nobody's done any work, as far as I know, on the problem of those. I think the main issue with the organic slug pellets is that they don't really work, do they? I mean, have you found any success?
I don't know. Martin.
I mean, the friends of mine who garden seriously and grow their own vegetables, I mean, they use the tried and tested technique of wandering around the place late at night with a pair of scissors, or you attract all the slugs underneath. If you find something that slugs really like, and you have just low piece of slate over a couple of bricks, and the slugs will turn up underneath there, and then you just deal with them in the morning. But no, I'm sorry. There are so many different alternative sort of things, putting copper wire around things, putting coffee grounds around things, eggshells around things. And as far as I've seen, none of them seem to work. But if you've got some evidence of them working, then that'd be actually really lovely to share.
I've got the solution. If you don't grow vegetables, okay, you need to control the slugs munching through your lettuces. But if you're only growing flowers, just stop buying flowers that slugs eat. I've got a garden here that is full of plants that slugs and snails, they nibble away, and I don't care. I've got flowers that slugs and snails nibble away. I don't care. I've got a fantastic garden, flowers and stuff all year round, and I wouldn't ever bother buying these rubbish annuals from garden centres and supermarkets that slugs and snails love. Just get going with your wildflowers and your tough stuff, and you can have a beautiful garden without faffing about trying to kill things.
I would have to say.
Okay.
I would have to say.
Let's move away from slugs and back to hedgehogs, shall we?
I was about to just say, my chili plants. I got a word with those mollusks about my chili plants. I love those chilies. Anyway.
Any other questions about hedgehogs?
You really have to keep this lot under control, don't you, Rachel?
Oh, I know. I do my best. So, could I ask a question about them not having the fight or flight reflex? Is that problematic for them then? Because it's to not have that and just to have the curling up, and it doesn't really seem particularly impressive, and yet they've been around for a very long time. So
they've been around for millions of years.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, most threats that the hedgehog faces, and if you look at the evolutionarily, most threats that the hedgehogs face are dealt with remarkably well by curling up. I mean, certainly in our patch in the United Kingdom, well, in the range of the European hedgehog, there are very few animals that take them. Badgers will take them. Badger claws along the hedgehog spine, so they can simply open them up and start eating. And the only other big predator they've got are eagle owls. And we don't have breeding. Don't think we've got breeding populations here, have we? But so I've got in my oh, here we go. In my lovely little book over here, I've got a photograph of an eagle owl taking a hedgehog, and it's just like, it's quite remarkable actually what the eagle owl will do. So most species of predator, don't bother the hedgehog, and so there's no real need to develop other techniques. And actually, I think this is not the best way of doing it, but if you can just see this, we've got an eagle owl with a hedgehog. That's so the yeah, it's a very good defense. The things which are particularly poor with, so strimmers and cars and things, are just in a blink of an eye, evolutionarily. So, so Rachel, Sean has just asked a question, which we can start that one too. What threat of domestic dogs and rats? Rats aren't a problem, particularly. I mean, they might be bothersome to some newborns, but otherwise they're fine. Dogs, well, in the lovely park which I back onto here, it's an ideal place for hedgehogs, but the park will not have hedgehogs sleeping in it overnight, during the day rather, because there are so many dogs running loose in it. Dogs can cause a problem, so you can have issues in your garden, and it depends on your dog. I mean, my dog won't do his last wee in the garden. We have to take him for a walk down the street, whatever the weather. So we're not got a problem with that. But some people let their dogs out, and the dogs will end up shouting at whatever they see in the garden. And if the hedgehog just rolls up into ball, the dog gets more and more agitated. And some dogs will attack and kill hedgehogs. If you've got a dog which is going to do that, and you'll discover it will do that because it'll have done it once, then just don't let it do it again. You're letting it out at night in the garden, go out with it, take it out on a lead. Just don't let it loose killing hedgehogs, because why do that? But yeah, they can. We're actually training. There is a dog called Henry. He used to be into drugs, but now he's moved into hedgehogs. He used to be a sniffer dog for drugs, and it's brilliant. He's actually really effective. And for us, it's one of the really key things is when a developer's turning up to a place, and because the hedgehog is still not got the level of protection we would like it to. I forgot to add that it's now considered on the red list, considered vulnerable to extinction in the UK. But not so much so that it actually has shifted to Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. It's still on Schedule 6. We've been campaigning to get the hedgehog raised up to Schedule 5, only to discover that the quinquennial review, which is going on at the moment, is actually going to remove a whole bunch of Schedule 5 animals from protection anyway, so let alone the hedgehog getting a chance to move up it. So yes, I mean there are many issues which would be helped enormously by extra protection, not least of which is the obligation on the part of developers to act to remove hedgehogs safely and securely from the area they're about to destroy. Henry will step in there and make that job much easier.
Okay, thank you. Any final question for Hugh to take?
Yeah, I've got a question. If you aren't getting any help from the government ministers, have you thought of, or perhaps you have, gone to the HBF and talked to them about it?
Sorry, the who?
Oh, Home Builders Federation, the people who sort of oversee the developers.
Yes, I mean they're definitely on our radar. What we've actually managed to get is we've got Bovis Homes, which are now part of the Vistry Group. They were the first ones to come over to the side of the light, and they've committed to making all of their housing developments hedgehog friendly as long as possible. There are some developments on slopes and things where they can't guarantee there's going to be space to put in gardens and with hedgehog holes, but the vast majority. And then earlier this year, Taylor Wimpey joined in. And so what we're doing is we're gradually getting developers who are signing up for it. And then as the person who was speaking earlier, asking about developments around Buxton, the people I know who've been talking to the developers around their villages, around their towns, they've actually got these quite good success rates, and you'll have an individual development which has chosen to do good things. Even Persimmon, who are one of the least caring, it seems, have done it. And it just means that the next time Persimmon is in an area and somebody knocks on the door and says, well, what about hedgehog holes? There are fewer reasons not to do it. And the House Builders Federation would be great if they were on board. The Hedgehog Street campaign themselves have approached them, but we've not got any headway with that. But at the moment, it's based on developers themselves, and on the whole, if you can get to the boss of the developer, you can get through them. It's as I said, it was the issue of the contractor, the subcontractor, or sub-subcontractor, who then farms it out to somebody else to put in the gravel boards at the bottom of the fences. And if they don't get the memo, then it's harder to make it happen.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Rob. Any final question?
The books are available to all good bookshops and evil places that don't pay their tax.
Yes,
I'm not proud about where you get it.
I've also I've mentioned Wild Sounds as somewhere that might be good if you are interested in looking at Hugh's books and purchasing lots of them.
Wild Sounds are a lovely bunch, and if you say that you heard about it through here, if you buy through Wild Sounds, they told me they'd offer you guys basically a discount if you're from the society, or offer you something. They were going to do some deal. But anyway, they sounded very excited and supportive. So
Thank you very much. That's excellent.
Right, yeah.
Right. Well, in that case, can I bring the talk to a close by saying, Hugh, thank you very much indeed. Very entertaining talk, and some really thought-provoking stuff as well, because I think some of it for me rings bells in terms of swift bricks in houses, as well as action to be taken for hedgehogs. And there's stuff that we can do locally, both individually, but also in a more perhaps campaigning mode, talking to the local council, and especially if the local plan is being revisited from this year. So thank you for a very informative and entertaining talk. And I'm sure that we will invite you back again to talk about the linescapes. Yep, we'll put that book up too. And can I just remind people, well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for turning up for the talk. It's really nice to see everybody. And just to remind you that the next talk is in 2 weeks' time, and that's Steve Price talking about the wildlife of Nepal and India, village Nepal and India. So hopefully we'll see you all then as well. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Have a good rest of the weekend, and we apologise if you've missed Strictly, but it will be on iPlayer.
But then this talk will be available too.
Yes, and if you want to revisit this talk, of course, or if you want to point other people towards it, it's on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Hugh, and hopefully we'll see you in
next time. I'll be there in person.
Hey, yes,
and spend a ridiculously large amount of money in that lovely bookshop.
Yeah. Okay, Hugh, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks everybody.
And good night. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.